In studio this morning, as promised, the Tanaiste Minister for Foreign Affairs, Cork TD, Simon Coveney. So welcome, Simon. Good to see you on a sunny and dry Friday morning. Listen, can I just first refer, because I think that I wasn't fully aware of how much work was actually being done on behalf of Victoria's daughter, Fatima, whose interview I played before 10 o'clock. She's been away in Saudi for many, many years, and clearly her mother is very distraught. But there is a lot happening, yeah? Please tell me there is.
Yeah, there is, and I listened to your interview earlier on, and it's a very distressing case. I'm meeting Victoria actually later on this afternoon, as it happens, which has nothing to do with that interview. We had planned that.
That's right. She said
over a week ago. I met the Saudi ambassador this week for about an hour and a half, and we spent a good half hour speaking about Fatima and Victoria's case. This is a complicated case because we have an Irish citizen in another country, but in the custody of her father legally.
I get that.
We do have regular contact with social protection services in Saudi Arabia. They have met and spoken to Fatima, and they are continuing to monitor her welfare.
Irish consular staff?
No. The social protection services in Saudi.
Can the Irish consulate? I don't know whether they're.
I mean, we have, of course, an ongoing interest in trying to follow her welfare. The problem here is the legal system in Saudi Arabia, where a father has obviously rights to a daughter. So we're going to, of course, work with Victoria. This is an incredibly traumatic case. And we'll continue to work with her to do everything we can politically and with the legal system in Saudi Arabia. One, to try and make sure that Fatima is protected, and two, to do everything we can, if she wants to come home to her mother in Cork, which is I know where she wants to be. I have regular contact with Victoria, and we'll continue to have, and our consular team also have regular contact with the family.
Okay, so let's perhaps just leave it there, clear in the knowledge that you are working on it and your staff.
But I mean, these parallels that are made with
Lisa
Smith and her daughter, I mean, there really isn't any comparison here. First of all, we're not sending people out to get Lisa Smith.
They're in Turkey, so there's people in Turkey.
No, we've had an ongoing process to try and find out where Lisa Smith and her 2-year-old daughter is. My priority is with that 2-year-old little girl who's an Irish citizen, and she has been living effectively in a war zone for years, and I think we have an obligation to protect her.
Have you learned from the fact that the British didn't and the child died in the British case?
Well, whatever the British did is a matter for the British. We have to make our own decisions. I've made a decision many months ago that we have an obligation to an Irish citizen here, particularly a child, and we're not going to separate a mother from a child. If and when Lisa Smith is brought home or comes back home to Ireland, she will have serious questions to answer, and that is the way it should be. But the welfare of the child is my priority, and the reason why some Defence Force personnel were sent to Turkey was to help our embassy staff in Ankara, who are talking regularly to the Turkish military, because they are the ones in Syria, in northeast Syria, where Lisa Smith is. And it makes sense for us to have military personnel speaking to military personnel. But there isn't any special ops extraction plan or anything like that. If Lisa Smith comes home to Ireland, it'll be because the Turkish military have found her and have requested that Ireland take her home.
And your interest is in the child, not on Lisa Smith, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, my interest is primarily in the child.
Okay.
But I think we also have an obligation.
Because she paddled her own canoe if she went out there training fighters.
And as I said, Lisa Smith has a lot of serious questions to answer, and I suspect An Garda Síochána will be asking her those questions very directly when she comes back. But they are questions for when she is back with her daughter. What isn't acceptable for me is a 2-year-old Irish citizen in the middle of a war zone in a camp that we know, the camp that she was previously in was totally unsuitable for a child to be growing up in.
But do bear in mind, we have another 15-year-old Cork girl who clearly has told her mother she wants to come home.
And I'm meeting her mother today.
Yeah.
I've met the Saudi officials and the Saudi ambassador in relation to this case this week, and we are keeping in regular contact with Victoria and her family through our consular services, and I'm doing it personally as well.
Okay, all right. So this is a story that we will return to, and hopefully
I hope it'll have a happy end, Neil, because I think to be separated from your daughter, knowing that she is at risk, is heartbreaking.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. At least we managed to clarify some points on it, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks or months or whatever the case may be. It's far from happy on Lee's side, though. I wonder, are you aware? I know you've been up in Dublin, but clearly you must be aware of the A&E crisis. You could set your watch to our health service every winter. Like, there's a story in the Echo this morning where GPs are now apologising to patients because they have to send them to hospital. How bizarre is that for a headline? I'm sorry now, but I'm going to have to send you into hospital.
No. Look, it's been a very bad week in terms of
record numbers on trolleys.
The number of people on trolleys. I'm not sure whether it's quite a record, but it's certainly close to it.
69 on Wednesday.
No. It's certainly close to it. And there's been a lot of pressure in CUH as well.
No, it is a record. This is not fake news. There's a record was set this week. The highest number ever.
Okay, well, if it wasn't a record, it was very close to it. We have, we know we had the special delivery unit, which is essentially a national unit that visits hospitals that are under pressure, working with the management team in CUH this week. We have assigned, Simon Harris has assigned 26 million euros to a winter initiative this year to try to alleviate pressure on hospitals, to put more money into Fair Deal to get people out of hospital back home with the supports that they need, to get people out of hospitals into step-down facilities.
There are none. There aren't enough.
Well, there are more than there has been in the last number of years. We've added about 270 extra beds to our hospital system, and we will continue to.
But that hasn't worked. You've added hundreds of beds in the last few years, and yet you still have. There was a woman died on a trolley. Her son was on the air with me.
Yeah, because we've had a dramatic increase in the numbers of people attending hospital, which is why we've been investing very heavily in primary care facilities. The largest primary care facility built in the country is on the north side of the city. We also have a very large new one in Carrigaline. And so we need to continue to invest in keeping people out of hospital and putting significantly increased numbers of beds into our hospital system.
Well, we kind of know that, though, don't we?
But both of those things are happening, Neil. But they can't happen overnight. I mean, there was a policy decision made when we had lots of money during the last boom to actually cut bed numbers.
Close the A&E in the Southern Infirmary.
And we that was a big mistake.
Huge.
It wasn't made under a Fine Gael government.
But you could have reversed it.
We have reversed it. Right, and we are now adding a lot of beds to the system, and we've committed to doing that. We have an agreed approach.
You've reversed what? The A&E at the South Infirmary?
No, we've reversed the decision to reduce bed numbers, and we are now adding significant bed numbers to the hospital system, including in Cork, and that will continue. We have an agreed position now across all political parties in terms of broader healthcare strategy, which is called Sláinte Care.
You know, I've heard this for decades.
Well, you may well have heard it for decades, but we can now, for much of the last decade, we couldn't afford to put the money we need into our healthcare system. We are doing it now. We're spending more money in healthcare now than the country has ever spent. It's close to 17 billion euros a year. And we will continue to increase expenditure by, I expect, close to €1 billion a year for some time to come, because that's what it needs. And we have more hospital consultants now than we've ever had, more nurses than we've ever had.
Surgeons are threatening to go on strike.
They are, and we need to work with them to make sure that doesn't happen. And there are many vacancies that aren't filled and need to be filled, both from a consultancy perspective but also from a nursing perspective. But we do have 600 more nurses now than we had this time last year.
Is that right? But you do know that nurses don't want to stay around here because of the terms and conditions that they have to work under and the pay, and that's why they're going overseas.
No, they are under pressure, but they do want to stay here too. That's why we have more nurses now than we had 12 months ago, and we need to keep that recruitment process
moving. But have you been in the A&E on a busy night?
Well, I've been in the A&E many times. I haven't been there recently at night time, but I've been in the A&E both, well, with my own children, but also meeting staff there at different times. Of course,
but would it not be, is it not your responsibility to do a spot check there, even as a local TD?
Well, as I say, I mean, I am a regular visitor to CUH, Neil.
But they probably know you're coming. They clean the place up and clear the trolleys away. They're photo ops, Simon. I'm saying just a spot check.
But I think it's a bit disingenuous to make the case that CUH will put on some kind of pretend approach just because I'm visiting.
We know they do. The staff have told me they do. Not just you, but even back in Mary Harney's day. No, but certainly with Leo Varadkar. So that was just nothing but a photo fest.
Well, you know,
they do.
You can say that, but I think the problems and the pressures in CUH are very real. You know, I had a brother working there for 3 or 4 years, Neil. I'm pretty familiar with the systems in CUH. They are under pressure. Some parts of CUH work really, really well.
They do. Yeah.
We don't hear anything about them because they're working really well. We have a fantastic new cancer care facility there, and we have a whole load of other investments that are working well.
That's when you get into the system.
We have real pressures in terms of A&E in CUH, as do other hospitals, particularly Limerick. And we are working with management to both invest in staff and new facilities to try and alleviate that pressure, and we'll continue to do it.
You know, they call the A&E corridors the Mary Harney suite.
Well, look, I'm not going to personalise this. I mean, you know,
that's how far back this goes.
You know, but it's easy for me to blame another political party. You know, I could go into talking about Fianna Fáil's record in health, but that, to be honest, doesn't solve the problem. I'm in government now. I need to take responsibility for the pressures that the health system is under, and we will continue to invest.
You are in government. You are.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, Cork, and see that one. Cork on the brink of a heroin epidemic. Lawlessness on our streets. 2 Gardaí on a Saturday night. I mean, your eyes off the ball here as the senior man on Lisa, I can tell you.
Well, it's not. I mean, they are. I mean, don't forget when we came into government, you know, Templemore was closed. There was no Garda recruitment. Since 2017, when it was reopened again, I think we've seen 69 extra guards coming to Cork City. Obviously, more guards coming to Cork County as well. And we have enough money in the budget for an extra 1,000 guards next year across the country. And obviously, Cork needs to get its fair share of those. But, you know, people shouldn't forget where this country is coming from. 10 years ago, we were bankrupt. We had the IMF in the country deciding how money was to be spent. We are recovering from that. We've made fantastic progress in loads of areas. Cork now, I think, has an unemployment rate of 4.2%. 10 years ago, it was 15%.
Are you adding Novartis onto that now? Are you adding the jobs that were lost in the post office onto that?
Yeah, I am. And of course, job losses are always regrettable. But we are creating jobs every week in Cork at multiples of the numbers of the job losses that we have unfortunately seen. And I visited Novartis myself to speak to management last week to understand the reasoning behind their decision and also the options, to understand the options for people in Novartis in terms of alternative employment, and they are very strong. But just because the economy has bounced back really strongly doesn't mean we still don't have significant problems that are linked to a decade of underspending because of recession. And housing and healthcare are the 2 key areas there where we are continuing to catch up. I'm sure we'll talk about homelessness and housing in a second, but you know,
I asked you why on a Saturday night in Cork. Because I'm in there an awful lot. I was in there last night, and I never see guards in the city. What I do see is a lot of homeless people. I see an awful lot of people out of their heads. I saw a young girl last night who was completely out of her head on Patrick's Quay. Very pretty girl, only in her early 20s. She could have been. She is anyone's son or daughter. She was completely out of it. Yeah. She turned around and she fell back and hit her head off a step. It's a wonder that she didn't split her head open. And she went off up the street, fighting with people, shouting with people, almost zombie-like. And I watched her for a long period of time. And this is very regular on our streets, like people being harassed and robbed. Or
but Neil, you know, there is of course a responsibility for the state here in terms of policing, but there's also a responsibility for individuals and families, and parents have a responsibility for their children too. And so, of course we need more Gardaí on the beat in Cork City, and I speak to the guards about that regularly.
What did they tell you? Where are the guards?
They say they want more guards and need more guards, but we have had more guards in the last 2 years, and we need more in the next 2, and we'll get them too. This week alone, the Taoiseach confirmed that he would speak directly to the Garda Commissioner in relation to policing in Cork, because that number was put to him of 2 Gardaí on the beat on a Saturday night. I don't know whether that's factually true or not, but if it is, it shouldn't have happened.
Well, the GRA said it happened.
Yeah. Well, we need more guards than that. That's not acceptable on a Saturday night. But I think we also need to ensure that society
I know that,
takes responsibility, for itself too.
But is it true that there is a freeze on admin staff within, say, take Anglesey Street Garda Station or the Bridewell, other ones where people aren't being hired to do an awful lot of the admin, the clerical, the typing of statements, all this stuff that we don't want our guards, who should be out fighting crime, having to do? If they have 40 cases each
actually, it's
on
quite the opposite, Neil. There isn't a freeze. We've taken on more civilians into the Garda system, and I can quote the numbers to you if you want.
Gardaí are bogged. This is the GRA. Gardaí are bogged down doing secretarial work as civilian typists are not being made available to them to type witness statements or interview transcripts. Their time has been taken up pushing keypads.
Yeah, which is why the new Garda Commissioner is actually changing Garda systems to actually put more civilians into Garda stations to get Gardaí out in the beat. That's exactly what's happening at the moment. And we have seen an increase in civilians working with the Gardaí in Cork. Relatively small numbers, but an increase nonetheless, and we'll see more of that.
But it's a cop-out to say that it's the parents' fault, though.
Sorry?
You said I'm saying to you, it's a cop-out to say that parents have a responsibility with regards to where their kids are, the type of people that they rear.
No, what I said was it's both, Neil. So don't put words in my mouth, please. There is a responsibility on the state to provide adequate policing on our streets at night. There's also a responsibility on parents to understand where their children are and how they're behaving. Both has to happen. We don't have some kind of big brother state that is responsible for everything. What we have and what we need to have...
Dublin does. It's totally over-policed.
No, Dublin doesn't. Dublin also has problems in relation to antisocial behaviour, over-drinking, drug abuse.
But you see guards everywhere. So I'm up there all of the time. There's guards everywhere.
So am I. I'm in both Dublin and Cork half
But you're not walking around the city then?
I am walking around the city.
When did you last walk around the city?
2 or 3 days ago, I would say.
At night?
Sometimes I walk around at night, yeah. I'm doing events. I'll be in the Metropole tonight, and I'm sure
I'll drive you to the front door, you'll see nothing.
Look, Neil, if you want to try and paint me as somebody out of touch, that's fine. But I think people who know me...
I think you're all out of touch. I think we need a Michael Healy-Rae character down here.
Do we?
I think we do.
Well, Neil, with respect, if you look at what's happening in Cork in many areas, because of the government prioritisation of Cork in terms of expansion and growth, we, for the first time in our history, have a proper second city strategy, which is why you're seeing so much positivity in terms of investment and growth and new building in the city centre, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades.
It's brilliant. I love my city. I love all the buildings. But
you don't want to talk about it because you want to just talk about negative things.
I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about real. I want to talk about realistic things, which is people's demand for a healthcare system, which I've dealt with, and also safe streets.
And I have dealt with.
You had 50 thugs on a bus to your parish who threatened to rape a bus driver.
Yeah, and we've seen a response to that from Bus Éireann in terms of security on that bus route now. And just on that bus route...
Is that the parents' fault that they threatened to rape the bus?
On that bus route, it is the first 24-hour bus service in the country.
No matter a damn, this happened at 20 to 9 at night.
You don't
People
want to
keep peddling out
recognise
a
the
24
fact.
bus.
You don't want to... If there was a 24-hour bus service in Dublin, Neil, you would be saying, why don't we have one in Cork? There isn't one in Dublin. There is one in Cork.
What's that got to do with the bus driver being threatened to be raped?
Because Cork prioritised for this. What happened on the bus was totally unacceptable, and Bus Éireann is responding to it by improving security on the bus. But I also think that we have to reflect on the fact that there are teenagers on a bus threatening a female driver with rape. We have to ask ourselves the questions: why are our teenagers behaving in that way?
Why do you think they are?
As well as putting the resources in place to make sure that we can have security to protect drivers. But I believe in a society that has rights but also has responsibilities. and we do have to ask ourselves those questions.
That's very nice, and it's a notional idea, but at the same time we still want guards on the street. We want them on the beat. We want them going on the squad cars. We want them,
and we're getting them. And so
when will that be?
We took over. When I say we, Fine Gael took over a country that was broke. And that had a previous government that actually closed Templemore, the Garda College. We've reopened it.
You're sending all the recruits to the border.
We've taken on significantly more guards since then, and yes, we have prioritised Dundalk and the border because there was an awful lot of violence happening in both. But that doesn't mean we haven't seen more guards in Cork, but we will see a lot more guards in Cork over the next year.
You see, I get frustrated because I see guards doing secretarial work and I see them being caught up for hours and hours on end in court, having to deal with defence solicitors and stuff like that. And then I see ambulances being caught up outside in the A&E at the CUH for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, handing over patients. And I think to myself, sure, that's easily fixed. If it was a private company, you'd fix it, you know? But nothing gets fixed.
Well, sorry, things do get fixed, but there are continuing demands.
But they don't.
More people are going to hospital now than ever before. That's why we need more staff, more beds, and a bigger budget. All of those things are happening, but they do take time.
But I'm just saying,
to fix.
I know that, and I'm just saying, it seems fundamentally always very simple for me to fix it. Like, I mean, even if it involves dismantling it and rebuilding the system again and saying, okay, well, the HSE is not fit for purpose, we need to scrap it. Or the guard.
With respect, if you dismantle a system, you still have to provide services every day, every hour in CUH and in other healthcare facilities. So the challenge for healthcare is, yes, we need significant reform, but we also need to maintain services during that reform programme. And that poses challenges. Some parts of our health system work fantastically well. Other parts of our health system are under huge pressure, and we need to focus on the resources and the staffing and the new policy that's needed to improve those areas. And that is happening. And we have an agreed approach across all political parties. It's called Sláinte Care in terms of how to do it. But everybody recognises that it's going to take the most part of a decade to get that done.
Can I just maybe sum up something that we get a lot on the air here with regards to housing or people looking for somewhere to live? One of the recurring themes happens to be with families with young children, for instance, who are being frozen out by landlords and letting agencies that don't want anything to do with them. They just want professionals, they want single people, ideally 3 or 4 adults to share a 3 or 4 bedroom house. Particularly if you have a mother who's looking for a home with 2 or 3 small kids, they don't even get a look in spite of the fact that they might go after 20 or 30 properties to rent. Some of them 1,200, 1,400, 1,600, 1,800 euro a month. This has gone beyond crisis point now on Leeside.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have and have had for some time a housing crisis in Ireland. We're responding to it, though, by the only way that is going to be effective, which is to increase supply. So if we continue to focus on trying to manage the same stock of housing to solve a housing crisis, it's not going to work. We need more social housing, we need more affordable housing, we need more affordable rental accommodation.
But again, they're the things we need. You're telling me that's the history lesson again.
No, let me give you some of the facts here, because this is happening. It's not something that's aspirational for the future. This year, we'll build over 2,000 housing units across Cork City and County. A few years ago, it was a fraction of that. I was speaking to the management in Cork City Council only last week, and they said in 2014, Cork City Council built 1 social house. 1. Okay? Because they didn't have the resources to do any more. Now they have 1,000 social houses, either in planning, under construction, or just completed this year. So we've gone from 1 to 1,000.
So that'll take 1,000 people off the housing list. But there are thousands and thousands of others that are on any list.
But sorry, we're just talking about 2019 here. There will be thousands of more social houses built in the coming years. And there needs to be. Cork City and County represents about 10% of the population. We need to be building at least 10% of the houses. This year nationally we'll build close to 22,000 houses roughly this year. Cork will certainly build 10% of that. In terms of social housing, we will add 10,000 social housing units, 10,000 social housing units to the social housing stock this year. When I became housing minister a number of years ago, the previous year, all of the local authorities in the country had only built 74, right? And we will have, in addition to our existing social housing stock, an extra 10,000 this year.
Nationally, of course.
Nationally, yeah. And in Cork, we will have our fair share of that, both city and county. Lots of significant projects. In fact, there are 78 projects across Cork City Council at the moment that will deliver 1,485 homes. In the county, there are 117 projects that will deliver over 1,600.
But wait a second now, they're not just rebuilds, refurbs of old properties
they're not.
That were demolished. So you're not actually...
We have refurbs and purchases on top of that.
No, you are. I bet you are including stuff that wasn't fit for purpose and knocked, and they built new houses where families would... That doesn't take anybody off a housing list.
Not in those figures. We have 78 projects in the city already completed or at planning, design, tender or construction stage that will deliver 1,485 homes. And you can see some of those projects that have been completed and owned. I've opened some of them.
Well, I've seen some. I mean, what I see is an awful lot of apartment blocks being built.
Well, I hope you do. Right, but I'm
not put Cork families in them,
because we need apartment blocks in Cork City, high quality, good
for tech and pharma.
Good ones. Well, no, but look, all of these things are linked. We need student accommodation too. We have
loads of that coming out your ears at ridiculously high rent. But that's capitalism, I suppose.
No, but what student accommodation does, Neil, is that it takes students out of other homes that families could be living in. And there are many parts of this city that are full of students.
But your landlords won't let families into the houses. They only want the students. They only want the professional tech farmers.
That's because when there's a shortage of housing, landlords can pick and choose who they want. What we need is a significant increase in supply so that there are homes available for families and the student accommodation that's appropriate.
But you know that builders and developers say it's too expensive to build.
But look, Neil, no matter what I say, you're going to try and put a negative spin on it.
For God's sake, man. I'm not here to hand you lollipops.
I'm not looking for that.
Why do you make it cheaper for developers and people involved in construction to buy and build?
And that's exactly what we have done. We have what's called a LIHAF fund, which is the state investing in the infrastructure, water, gas, in some cases flood protection, to help sites get moving, because otherwise developers wouldn't be able to afford to do it. We are spending tens of millions of euros in Cork on that kind of funding. We have a streamlined planning system that has helped developers to get planning faster, but still go through a robust planning system. But instead of it taking about 2 years, it's taking about 26 weeks for large-scale developments.
So Callan Properties and Michael O'Flynn and John Cleary, they're all being helped, are they?
Sorry, we've just seen John Cleary this week apply for a very large apartment complex right smack in the city centre on the Sexton site. I think it's 24 stories, over 200 apartments in that building.
And how many Cork families with 2 or 3 children will be inside in those?
Sorry, no, but look, there will be people who will want those, who will free up houses that are more suitable for families. That's the whole point here, Neil. If we're not building more housing units of all types, that's apartments, it's family homes, it's student accommodation, it's social housing, it's affordable housing, it's affordable rental. All of those things have to be progressing at the same time. And they are now progressing. They haven't, unfortunately, been for the last 10 years, because we've been coming out of recession. So we have moved from building virtually no social housing in Ireland to now building an extra 10,000 this year. We have moved from, I think when I became housing minister, it was about 12 or 14,000 housing units nationally were being built. This year it'll be about 22,000.
Yeah, I love the national picture. My priority is here.
And in truth, Cork will need to build a lot more houses per head of capita than the rest of the country, because we are planning for a growth period in Cork where the population will go from just over 200,000, which is what the city is now because we've expanded the boundary, to hopefully a figure of close to 350,000 in the next 20 years. That means we will see a growth period in Cork City that we haven't seen since independence. And that means more jobs, but it also has got to mean more houses, more schools, expansion of...
That's not going to work.
Well, sorry, that is working.
It's not, because those jobs will be filled by people coming in who are highly skilled, primarily from overseas.
No, it'll be a mix of things, Neil.
You're going to increase pressure.
No, sorry. If you look at what is happening in the Docklands right now, on the Horgan's Quay site, there's a new hotel, there's new office accommodation, and there's planning permission for a new apartment complex. You look next door on Penrose Wharf, a huge new office block being built. You look across the river at Navigation Square.
They're putting the cart before the horse.
These are Cork people on these building sites, building the Cork of the future.
You're going to increase pressure on Cork people who can't get homes.
No, because we need to build homes for those people
faster
too.
Then.
And we are building faster. Like I said, a few years ago, Cork City Council built one social house. They currently have 1,000 on site. So that is what is happening in Cork.
Not everybody looking for a home is on a social housing list.
I accept that, which is why, if you come to Carrigaline, where I live, you will see one of the biggest housing developments in the country outside of Dublin being built by Stephen McCarthy, called Janeville, just outside of Carrigaline, and a whole load of other smaller housing estates being built. In fact, next week I'll be opening a new social housing estate in Carrigaline. So, and I'm just talking about Carrigaline. The same needs to be happening in other parts of Cork and surrounding towns as well. This isn't easy stuff, Neil. Ireland has come out of a deep recession. Cork was impacted by that, like other parts of the country. We had unemployment rates here of close to 15%.
We did. I remember people leaving in the 80s, going off on the dole because they had
instead of our young children actually leaving to build careers in the UK and Australia and Canada and the US, they're building them here now.
But the only difference is, right,
and they're able to find jobs
here. There was always somewhere to live back then. Now we have a housing crisis, we have a health crisis, and we have a crime crisis, and we have a drug crisis.
Well, Neil, if you can point to me at any point, like I've been in politics for 20 years, I don't ever remember a time when there hasn't been a health crisis. Sorry, no.
There hasn't been a health crisis.
Where there hasn't been a health crisis. You quoted Mary Harney to me earlier. You look at the time when
Wait a second.
You look at the time
we had full service in the South Infirmary. We had full service in the North Infirmary, right? We had the Bonds doing an awful lot of the maternity. We had the Ire and Throat. We had the Mercy Hospital. We had the Ernville Hospital. We had loads and loads of hospitals.
Yeah.
Everything then but changed around to this centre of excellence at the CUH, which has failed.
Sorry,
that wasn't the case 10 or 20 years ago when you started in politics.
Neil, with respect, you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to
what do you mean? I'm on the air for years. I have an idea what people tell me.
No, sorry. I don't pretend to be an expert in healthcare, but I do take the advice of experts who are. The model that we're trying to create in Ireland, the model that Micheál Martin, when he was a health minister, introduced, was to try to centralise expertise in different parts of the country. And we have the largest hospital in the country, in Cork, in CUH, providing specialist care in many areas that other hospitals simply don't have the capacity to provide that specialisation. And we have specialisations in Cork that didn't exist 10 and 20 years ago because of that scale. That doesn't mean we don't have huge problems when it comes to A&E and basic healthcare provision, which we need to improve on.
But sure, there's not just A&E. There's waiting lists for children, for paediatrics, for orthodontics, for also optical issues. There's people with issues with regards to hips and knees and surgery. I have a text from a man who has cancer there this morning. I haven't read it out yet. Twice in the last 2 weeks, his surgery for cancer was cancelled. The first time they couldn't find a theatre to operate, and the second time they had the theatre, but they had no bed to put him in afterwards.
And that's a capacity issue, which is a big problem, which is why we need more beds, and we need a new hospital in Cork. And we have, in a 10-year capital plan, we have significant monies for a new hospital in Cork. Before the end of the year, I hope we'll be able to make a decision on where that will be.
Okay, a new hospital in Cork will be built, will it?
Yeah.
Okay, the only point I'm making, and you disagree with me, is you say that it was always this bad. And I'm saying to you it was not all.
Sorry, I didn't say it was always this bad.
You said we always had.
I said we have always had crisis in healthcare. And if you remember consecutive health
And I'm trying to tell you, it was never this bad. I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you honestly, you need to know.
In certain areas, it is particularly bad at the moment, particularly around trolleys and A&E. But can I say that, for many years, up until relatively recently, trolley counts didn't even happen. They do now. So all of the problems in our health system are now exposed in a very public way, and they need to be dealt with.
Simon, there are people sleeping in doorways in Cork, in alleyways. They're shooting up in car parks. They're being fed by penny dinners, hot dinners. Penny dinners were feeding 100 and 150 people a decade ago. They're feeding 2,500 people a week.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, which is why we need to get those people in their own homes and to try to get them retrained and supported through social welfare services and potentially back into jobs. I've been into penny dinners. These are challenges, and I've said to you many times in this interview, when it comes to healthcare, housing and homelessness in particular, there are significant problems that need significant resources to solve. This year on housing alone, next year on housing alone, we'll spend 2.6 billion euros.
I know that.
Which is multiples of what was spent.
I'm just trying to focus on, and I'm not saying...
I'm not pretending that everything is rosy. It's not.
We have homeless groups go out on a nightly basis. Are you aware of them? They have different specified nights each. Do you ever volunteer with
housing,
them?
And I was Minister for Homelessness. I've been out with these people on soup runs, Neil.
Thank you for, because I wanted to know that. I want to know these things because they're bringing hot food home to children. I was at one where a 2-year-old came up in a buggy with her mother and they were looking for socks for the child and nappies for the child in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, do you not think that I work with organisations like the Simon Community and others in Cork who are trying to provide homeless services? Do you not think I've been into the family hub in Cork?
People don't want to go into Simon. Right? People don't want to go into Vincent de Paul. It's too dangerous for them.
Of course they don't want to. They want homes for themselves.
No, they prefer to sleep on the street.
Most people do not prefer to sleep on the street, Neil. Some people have chosen to sleep on the streets and we need to change that and give them the options to come in. But many people do choose, the majority of people choose to go into emergency accommodation, and it isn't ideal, but we're trying to improve it and invest in it all the time. But ultimately, where we need to be is finding people homes of their own, and if they can't manage those homes on their own, give them support in doing that.
They can't. You can't give a lot of these misfortunes a home.
Yes, I know, and that is why we have a housing first strategy in Cork now, which is about essentially assisted supported living, and there is a lot of quiet work going on, which is changing people's lives in Cork, finding appropriate living accommodation for them and supporting them to give them the best chance of starting a new life.
You know that 2 died. One wasn't technically homeless. He was in a guest house. He was kicked to death. He died. They switched off his life support machine. And then, of course, we had another man who died. He was also kicked to death in the streets of Cork.
He was murdered.
Yeah.
And that's a Garda investigation.
That wasn't happening years ago. People weren't being attacked like that. They just weren't.
Yeah, no.
Because they weren't living on the streets.
Yeah, and that, but I mean, there is both of those are absolute family tragedies. And I'm not going to go into the personal stories of either of those cases because I don't think it's appropriate.
Well, I know, but I happen to know the personal story of one of them.
As you know, Neil, homelessness is not just about providing a home or for somebody. It's also often about a far more complex series of issues in people's lives.
Why don't
that are often chaotic,
you probably
that
never
need the
will.
state to help them.
They do need help, and they do. Why don't you just sanction the injection centre and just go for it? Is it because you're afraid? Is it because politicians are afraid to make hard decisions because they won't be re-elected?
Centre. I want to see a place where people can come, and if they're addicted to drugs, and we need to help them get off that addiction, I want to see a place that is safe and clean and hygienic for them to come and inject, so that we can bring them.
And whose call is this? Who will decide on it?
Just let me finish, please. So that we can bring them in to the health system and work with them to try to get off those drugs. Otherwise, they'll be injecting on a quayside somewhere on their own, often in dirty, unhygienic conditions, and damaging themselves. And probably buying drugs as well from some gang somewhere. So what we need to do is bring people who are addicted and are living chaotic lives as a result of that into a managed program and system. And injection centres are a proven way of doing that. And it's not popular among some people to say that, because finding a location for an injection centre is difficult.
Whose responsibility is that?
Who'll
find it?
Ultimately, Catherine Byrne is the minister. She is advocating strongly for an injection centre in Dublin at the moment. Dublin City Council has decided to reject that. And she is still trying to push ahead.
And the fear is that it would happen, it would be rejected here as well.
Of course, because...
But why don't you look at the Portuguese model then and decriminalise a lot of drugs like they've done? And apparently it's worked very well for them.
Well, I'm not sure that works. I mean, what we have done...
But the criminal system isn't working with regards to the weed either.
We have changed our approach towards drugs from being purely a criminal response to actually seeing it as a health issue. And when people are addicted... whether it's heroin or whether it's cocaine or whether it's something else. We want to try and bring them into the healthcare system to be able to wean them off those drugs over time and manage that with them, as opposed to seeing them purely as somebody who's breaking the law. And that is the change in the new national drug strategy. But we've also got to have...
But a heroin addict is not a criminal.
We've also... But they are using drugs illegally.
Yes, right? They are, but they're addicts. They are addicts,
and they need to be patients of our health system, as opposed to somebody who's shunned from society in the darkness of night, right? And but that being said, we do have open drug trading on our streets in Cork now, and that is a Garda issue, and we do need to ensure
you need to put guards on the beat to see the dealing.
And if people are peddling drugs and selling drugs to vulnerable people,
they're everywhere. There's dealers everywhere. They're going around with rucksacks on their back.
No, Neil, and I'm saying that and recognising it, and that is a policing issue. So there is a twin approach that's required here, from a policing perspective and also from a healthcare perspective in terms of the addicts, and both of that needs to happen.
Okay, last word before I leave, because I'm clearly out of time, and I appreciate you coming in this morning. Your baby is about to be born. That's a metaphor, incidentally.
Yes, yeah.
But
I remember when my children were born. And I mean, when it comes to talking about our hospitals, you know, CUH gets a lot of stick, but I can tell you my personal experience in that hospital has been pretty good.
Anyway, this baby that I'm referring to is a bricks and mortar one, and I was saying that there was clear blue water yesterday, and I'm kind of okay with this objection if it's on a heritage and cultural grounds. The convention centre may be a little bit more in the wait because somebody's objected, right?
Yeah. So look, I mean, this is, I suppose, my baby politically. I've spent a number of years trying to move this project on, and there's been a great team in Cork City Council who've been helping us.
I get that. No time for the history lesson on this one, though.
Okay. So the issue now is that yesterday was the final day for objections to the planning permission that's been granted by Cork City Council for the new event centre, which is bigger than the previous one. At the very last minute, one person decided to object, a third party objector as it's called, which will take this to Bord Pleanála. She's objected on the basis of wanting to protect the heritage of the site, which is underground. It's an archeological site.
She wants the area showcased, and I agree with her.
Yeah,
she wants more to be spent on that.
So what I suspect will happen now is that the developer will talk to her and see whether...
They hardly will if they won't pay. They don't want to pay for the footbridge, man.
Neil, I spoke to the developer this morning and to City Hall. They will engage, I suspect now, to see whether or not her concerns can be addressed in a sensible way. If they can't, well then obviously Bord Pleanála then need to make a judgment.
You picked up the phone, spoke to Theo, is it?
I did, yeah.
Good. Okay, that's good.
I do that regularly. I'm trying to move this project on, Neil.
Okay.
You know, and I take a fairly hands-on approach to get it done.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, Simon. Appreciate you coming in this morning. We covered an awful lot of ground. Have a good weekend. Simon Coveney.
The Neil Prendeville Show.